World of Tanks game settings are very much overlooked in regards to earning the best performance in your game. So guys, many of you have requested an overview of the game settings I'm using in World of Tanks, and now we're just gonna do that. So guys, let's talk about graphics first. Now I am playing the game in 1800 by 1080p. Now I just put this into 1920 for the video. Now I have a 1920 by 1080 monitor, and I have downgraded the resolution of the game to 1800 by 1080, which basically just means 120p loss. And because when you downgrade your resolution, the vertical movement of your mouse, so this kind of movement on your mouse, gets much smoother, and it's going to be really good and a pleasant experience when you're trying to aim for those weak spots and for those tracks. Because the most kind of aiming in World of Tanks is done vertically and not horizontally. So this little feature is going to be coming in very handy, and you should actually try this out in case you would like to have a little bit more competitive gameplay and less kind of visual beauty of the game. It also makes the enemies and your tank a little bit wide. You can do these resolutions in the NVIDIA game settings on the bottom right corner of your Windows. You open it up and you can do that. I'm gonna leave a link in the description on how to do that in case you would like to try it out. But in my opinion, it's a very useful feature in case you wanna aim for weak spots because of the vertical movement. I have vertical synchronization turned off. That's very important if you want to achieve the least amount of delay in your game when it comes to shooting. And you also want to make sure that your display refresh rate is up to the maximum of your monitor. In this case I have 144. You can also tamper around a little bit with the color adjustment here. You can set a different color scheme for your game. As you can see, I'm switching between them, and you can see that the tint of the game itself is changing. Now I'm using contrast, and I've been using deep in the past, so I would recommend using these two. Core to details though, this is very important guys. You can either play on standard render. In case you're a huge tryhard, you can just play on standard render, have textures on maximum, everything else turned off except draw distance on maximum, because draw distance will allow you to have full vision of the tanks that are really far away from you. And pretty much everything else can be turned off. Standard render basically simplifies your game, and this way you can absolutely concentrate on the actual gameplay itself without being bothered by the extra effects that the video quality provides you with. Now, I've been using improved down streams because a lot of people have been asking for it, because, you know, I used to have a bad PC and I have a good PC, and so I put the quality up a little bit higher. But these are my current settings that I'm playing at. Texture quality on maximum. It's kind of just for the looks of things. Draw distance on maximum once again. Probably gonna set this on ultra actually. Object LOD on high. Don't want any fancy stuff happening. Lighting quality on high. Shadow quality on maximum. Post processing on high. And the motion blur effect is turned off, guys. This is very useless effect. You should turn this off because it's going to be very disturbing when you're actually playing the game and you're trying to rotate your camera. Now, talking about the terrain and water, you can set these to anything you like. It doesn't really matter. Terrain quality on high, can be ultra, maximum, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The vegetation quality can also be high. I recommend this setting because this way the bushes are going to become a little bit more transparent, and you're also going to have a better idea of how thick and how much camo value a bush really gives you when you're trying to aim through it. Now, these ones are really useless. Foliage transparency, turn it off, you don't want that. Grass and sniper mode, turn it off, you don't want that. These are just disturbing effects you don't want while aiming through foliage and grass. Now, terrain desolation, you also don't need this one. And please, guys, for the love of God, turn the extra effects off. Turn everything off here. You don't need any of this. It's going to be really annoying, especially when you're playing an autoloader, like a fast autoloader, because you're gonna have, like, you turn this up and you're gonna have huge boom basically on your screen, and a huge flash on your screen whenever you're firing, and you don't want that when you're trying to aim for those weak spots. Now also 3D render resolution. This will also depend on what kind of PC you are using. Once again, the most important factor is these effects. They have to be turned off, but the rest can be basically just based around what kind of PC you're using and what kind of video quality you would like to have. Now also, yeah, the motion blur effect, just turn this off, as I said. As for sound, I like to play with voice notifications on because it gives you a little bit of like feedback on what's happening without checking around you. The music for me is turned off, ambience is turned off. These are just all disturbing factors in case you're aiming for high damage gameplay. Now the vehicles are also a little bit lower here. Don't want to have your tank just brooming around all the time, you know, because that's a little bit disturbing as well for me after playing the game for 8-9 years. As for the controls, these are all based upon your own preference, really. I'm using the basic controls over here. I'm using space instead of shift though for aiming, and I'm using Q for the handbrake. Now again, for sensitivity, this is actually very important, guys. The lower your sensitivity is in World of Tanks, the better your aim is going to be. Now, the sensitivity also correlates with the amount of DPI you have on your mouse. In this case, I'm using 800 DPI on my mouse, and my sniper aim is set to this kind of value. There is also a file in the game if in case you switch PCs, or in case you move, or in case you go to your girlfriend's place or whatever to play World of Tanks, you can carry over these settings files. There's a preference.xml file called in your directory in app data. So you can also just copy that over and you can keep these settings. You don't need to set them every time. Now, some of these settings are actually account bound. These ones here, the battle interface ones that we're going to talk about in a little bit, are all account bound, but the graphic settings and all that are PC bound. So if you guys want to keep those settings and you do not want to transfer over them or change them every single time, then you can just pick the file up and you can just copy paste it into the folder that you want it to on your new PC. As for the reticles are also very, very preferential. What I found best working are two things. I found diagonal is good because it gives you this little highlight here. It just gives you like some kind of object that you can orient yourself in when you're trying to aim. If you turn this off, you lose that, but you also still have a little bit of line here that you can still use. This is the best thing I found. You can also use the radial, it's fairly same. You have these lines and it's actually quite good. So as for the reticle, guys, I'm using an O-shaped one. It's a green circle basically, and if you're using the aim point one, which gives you the armor penetration indicator, which highlights on either red, orange or green depending on the armor value that you're actually aiming at. And if you're using this and you're also going to be able to pen the targeted armor plate, this is going to become green, of course, and then the whole reticle is going to become green. So it's going to be very, very easy to tell what you're aiming at, tell it apart if whether you're gonna pen or not. Now the same goes for the sniper mode. One thing I found really good in sniper mode is that you have these small lines here, right? You can highlight them a little bit more, and these small lines here, right here, you can also see some triangles and also some extra aiming stuff for distance. You can also use them. I don't like to have them on 100. I just put them on 50 most of the time because they can be a little bit more disturbing when you're trying to aim for those weak spots and those especially at long range. But if you put them on 50, you're going to see them just visible enough for you to help yourself aim and also not be that disturbing anymore. Now as for the aiming circle, I usually use the circle 1 with load indicator. I don't really like the other two. And also sometimes I switch to the solid one. The solid one I don't really like that much. I found that the circle one is better for snapshotting, but once again, this is again personal preference. For marker, it doesn't really matter that much. One thing that really matters though is you have auto aim indicator turned on in case you're trying to auto aim somebody. In this case, when you auto aim somebody, there is going to be a crosshair appearing over the target. Very important because this will exclude the option of you accidentally auto-aiming someone and maybe not be aware of it. Also, a very important thing here, guys, is to have the health indicator turned off for friendlies, because if there's a lot of friendlies and enemies in the same cluster, like up close together, this is going to be make it easier for you to actually see through the cluster itself and identify the HP of your enemies without having to read that much. Because if you have this enabled, then it's going to become like very, very on top of each other, the HP indicators, and it's not going to be good. So you want to turn this off. As for the battle notifications, I really like having the advanced on, because this one basically just is basically a cheat mode, right? Because if you turn your camera exactly to where these thingies point, basically where the shot is coming from the enemy team, and you can actually put that into the center of your screen, you can tell which bush they are firing from. That is very useful for blind shooting people, especially in bushes, especially light tanks, especially TDs that are camping behind bushes. So you definitely want to have that on. One thing that also tells you, obviously the module damage they did, the amount of damage they have, and also this is very, very important stuff and very useful stuff that you might want to have on. Now as for battle events, I like to have everything on except the event name, because it just once again gets my screen a little bit more cluttered than it should be. As for the log, it's personally up to you what you prefer. I like not having this on all the time. I just like to press Alt to display the detailed damage here. Everything else is displayed up here. The amount of damage you do, the amount of shells you block, the amount of damage you block, and the amount of spot that you actually do. Now, map order doesn't really matter. Battle report missions, this one is very useful as well. You want to have display team HP bar, display team HP number, and display team HP difference on as well. Very useful to actually tell when your team is losing, and very useful to actually tell when to fall back in the back line and to try to survive as long, to try to dish out as much damage as you can. Now, on to one of the most important factors here, and the last factor, the general settings right here. The most important thing is you can either have this on, the 16 times zoom. 16 times zoom is fairly useful on tanks which are a little bit more accurate, like Leo 1 or Grilla or whatever, some sniping tanks as TRV. X25 I don't recommend using because it just makes you think that you're more accurate than you usually are. Now once again, you want to use a tactical view that basically enables you to zoom out from your position and actually get an overview from above on the enemy and your team's positions, which is very, very useful in trying to tell what the enemy is doing and trying to plan your next move. Now also horizontal stabilization in sniper mode, very important guys, probably the single most important setting in the whole game. You have to turn this on, because otherwise if you're moving, then your gun is just gonna be like moving around all the place and you will not be able to aim, because otherwise it's going to be really bad. Now also one thing I like telling, and a lot of people have been asking about, is the cell reticle. The cell reticle basically puts your reticle in the middle of the screen just like client reticle would do, but it moves a little bit differently. The client reticle moves very fluid because it doesn't count into the amount of lag you have between you and the server. Now cell reticle actually counts that lag into that equation, and the server reticle is going to be pointing exactly where the server thinks your reticle is truly pointing, so that basically if you are having micro lags, if you're having ping issues, anything, you're going to be knowing where your reticle is pointing. And basically it's very important when you're peeking around corners, for example on Himmelsdorf, and you think your gun is facing one way but your gun is actually facing the other way, because the server thinks differently as your client sometimes, and basically you just end up missing a crucial shot, which basically can just cost you the game. Usually if you have less than 80 ping, I recommend using reticle. If your ping goes above 80, it's going to be really slow, and I think using client reticle will be a much better experience in that case if you're playing with high ping. Also recommend using a VPN if you have a high ping, because VPNs can actually lower your ping. For example, I've been playing on RU2 from the European Union, of course, and my ping would usually be 60 to 70. In this case, with the VPN I'm using, I only have 30 to 40 ping, which is absolutely huge, almost a minus 50% difference in terms of ping. About battle communication, you want to have all these on. It's very important, very useful in trying to communicate with your allies. These ones are not that important here. Preferred sniper mode zoom level. You want to have this on either last use or on X2. I usually have it on last used because sometimes I'm playing on autoloader and sometimes I'm unaiming between shots to check my surroundings. Even in the 2.52 seconds, it's very important to check your surroundings, and in that case, when you're aiming back in, it's going to pop back to the last used sniper mode zoom level that you had. You can also leave this on X2 in case you're playing, because if you leave this on X2, it basically forces you to re-aim every single shot. And also when you're playing, when you leave this on X8 for example, and when you go back into sniper mode, you might tunnel vision on the target. Now guys, about this, random battle settings: encounter, assault, grand battle. Grand battle is a waste of time, unless you want to do missions in certain tanks. You can do them here, but it's a waste of time, doesn't count into stats. Also it's a big cluster F, so you don't really want to play that. Assault, encounter are really unreliable in terms of damage. Sometimes you get the Malinovka encounter and it's going to be huge fun if you're playing a tank with gun depression. But sometimes you get a Siegfried line assault attack, and the Siegfried line assault attack is just big pain in the ass, and you don't really want to play that because it's going to just ruin your damage all the time. Encounter on the other hand is very dangerous, because your team or the enemy team can actually just cap the base, and in that case you're not going to be doing that much damage or that much performance in the battle. Now again, very important settings guys. You want to have enable expanded minimap features on always, because this obviously displays the amount of spotting range you have, the render range, the direction your vehicle's at, all the enemy tanks, the plus place they have been spotted. Very important piece of advice to have that kind of information on all the time. Now again, tips on a battle loading screen. You want to have this on minimap, because if you have this on minimap and your battle is loading up, you're going to be seeing the minimap and the map, the side that you're going to be playing on, which basically gives you an extra 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to think and to actually analyze the enemy's lineup and also your lineup and make the decision of where you're gonna go on that certain map. It's very useful if you ask me. And once again, as for the minimap, you want to have all these turned on. They are very useful features like view range circle, draw circle, maximum spotting range. Very useful stuff. You definitely want to have those on. Also, if you're a good player or you just don't want to be recognized based on XVM in the battles, you might want to have anonymize your nickname in battle on, because this way the XVM will be broken and you will be shown up as a anonymized person without your stats being shown. So it's a very useful feature. Thank you guys for watching the video. If you liked it, throw me a like, and also visit me on twitch.tv/kajzoo, where I'm streaming every single day at 8 CET. See you there.